Andrew Hilton is the director of the Centre for Study of Financial Innovation. He says we need to be prepared to split the casino bank from the utility bank. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Is it enough? Did they go far enough?
Probably not. The interesting thing is that this is an interim report. It's very hard to push further in the final report. It's easy to draw back. The industry is going to press very hard. It's going to lobby hard for against anything which actually increases the cost of banking. Therefore, it's important that the Commission should put on the table a position which generates a debate, because it's going to have to pull back from that. It's going to be impossible to push further. So I'm a little disappointed, not surprised, but a little disappointed.
What did you want that they hadn't announced?
I would have liked to have seen more talk about size caps on the bank, about perhaps breaking out the investment banking from the retail banking. I think the danger of simply looking at this in terms of jacking up core Tier 1 capital, which is one of the key proposals, is that that is going to push up the cost of banking and the cost of all the services that banks provide. It's also going to encourage banks to take more risk in order to earn the returns that their shareholders are going to demand.
And risk is what many are saying is what caused the mess that we got into a couple of years ago.
We don't want to be pushing the banks into taking excess risk going forward. And I think everyone assumes that capital is a free ride. Everyone assumes that the way to regulate banks is push up the capital requirement without understanding that capital costs money, and that money has to be paid for.
What about ring fencing? Because banks should ring fence retail operations, so says the ICB, and the ring fencing, Andrew, to be carried out by a separate subsidiary. Does that mean that the separate subsidiary will have to be independently capitalised?
I think it does. I think it does. But at the moment, they seem to be talking about ring fencing the retail operations, therefore, presumably also ring fencing everything that is not retail. But still, it's very difficult to imagine that we can let's take a hypothetical, Barcap. Even if Barcap is separately capitalised, it's very hard to imagine that the UK could let it go under if, in fact, it got itself into the kind of mess that some investment banks got into 2 or 3 years ago.
One of the big issues here was too big to fail. We don't want a bank too big to fail. Are we still in that position? Are banks going to still be too big to fail?
Well, I fear so. And the only alternative to that is to have lots more banks. Failure should not be a sign of failure. Say failure of an individual bank should not be a sign of failure of the system. The system fails if you have so few banks that none of them is able to go under of its own accord.
But there will be further banks possibly, because the ICB has called for a substantial enhancing of Lloyd's branch sales, but it didn't condemn the original, or didn't say that the original takeover, Lloyd's and 8BOS, should be unwound.
Well, who's going to buy those branches? Santander is buying some of the branches at the present time. Who else is going to buy them? Are we going to sell them to HSBC, or are we going to sell them to BNP Paribas? It's very interesting that we aren't talking about, as it were, new entrants from the bottom up. What we really want is a lot more banks in this country.
One of the big fears, Andrew, was that the big banks, the Barclays, the HSBCs, the Standard Chartered, would see this and go, hang on, we're out of here. Is that still a risk?
I don't think it was ever really a risk. I don't think regulators work like that. I think it's inconceivable that Barclays could say, look, shop Barclays around to international regulators and say, who will give us the best deal? If they go to the United States regulators, the Fed or the OCC, for instance, the first thing the OCC will do is pick up the phone and talk to the FSA. And if the FSA says don't do it, the OCC
But aren't
will
US rules a bit lighter than these potential rules?
Well, everybody is looking at the UK. You know, we are best in breed in wholesale banking, and we're also, bizarrely enough, best in breed in financial regulation. So what is put on the table by this commission is enormously important for the international debate. It's going to be looked at within all the forums that regulators meet at Basel, in New York, everywhere else. And they're going to say, look, we're looking at the UK and we probably will follow.
What now, Andrew? I mean, final question. As we say, we've got 5 or 6 months till the next stage. Where do you think we go from here?
A fierce debate. Obviously, the banks are going to say, well, that's the maximalist position. Now we're going to push back. And they have enormous lobbying power. They have enormous lobbying power through the trade associations, through individual lobbyists, through MPs. There's going to be tremendous pressure to roll back from there. Therefore, it's terribly important that the Commission stakes out a position which is sufficiently radical, if you like, that when it has to concede, it still ends up with something that's important.
Andrew, thanks for joining us today. Andrew Hilton, Centre for the Study of Financial Innovation.